Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another live edition of The Green Rush, the business of cannabis talk show on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, your host, but I'm always joined by a good friend. And who would that be? David Rabinovitz. Hi, David. How are you?
Very well, Jimmy.
And I'm going to tease this now. I'm going to let our audience know, because I do see in the chat room, we already have a pretty good audience. And this will be the first time I've been able to actually monitor the chat room as we like to multitask this modern era. We're very excited about the show that we have planned this afternoon, and also very excited about the response that we've had to a lot of our videos on our social media network since the filing of the COA bill at the U.S. Senate by Senators Schumer, Booker, and Wyden last week. We're so proud to welcome in an old friend, someone who is becoming more and more, let's say, camera friendly, Chris, with your own little show. He's the CEO of MJBiz Daily. He's Chris Walsh. Hi, Chris. How are you? Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. No, I still have the face for radio, so the video side, I'm still polishing up my look here.
Well, again, you know what? You're not a dial twister, Chris. Okay, that's the most important thing. And if David Rabinovitz can be on camera, so can you. Okay.
I'm like the Ed McMahon of the show.
That's okay. Nothing wrong with Ed McMahon. He's a good man. Chris, what a week. The fact that I lived to see the day that the majority leader of the U.S. Senate was promoting the legalization of cannabis was incredibly historic, shocking, and yet maybe now, after what we've gone through over the last year and a half, I shouldn't be shocked anymore, and I should just be accepting it and applauding their passion for the cause. What was your reaction to the news conference that the senators held last Wednesday?
You know, I think as you were saying, it's a monumental moment. We'll get to what the chances are of this passing, but regardless, to your point, having the majority leader who has been talking about this for many months, and was he actually going to follow through? Was this a big, was this just a smokescreen? He was just talking about it. Does anything come to fruition? And he actually did make it a key part of his initiative this year. And that is, it's not only that you have a majority leader spearheading this, but you have one who has embraced it fully. And out of all the things going on in this country and in this world, he's made this a pillar of his focus right now. And I think that, to me, is what's even more important than just the fact that this bill has been introduced and that you have the majority leader behind it. It's that he has embraced it fully.
Right. And we have a 163-page document out there that's designed for shows like this, a public discussion about cannabis. And David, I know that you already told Chris what you thought of the summary that MJBiz Daily put out there, but let's make it official and tell him, and then you get to ask a quick question of Chris. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, Chris, as I mentioned earlier, I think what you guys did a great summary. There's been a lot of folks who are trying to summarize what's going on with the bill. Some of them are very long reads, but I think MJBiz, as usual, did a good job of summarizing what it is. But what's your impressions? I think nobody in the industry really thinks this bill is going to get over the line, especially in its current form. But
no,
what do you see as the bright sides of all this?
There's a lot of bright sides, and I think it is worth tempering expectations. If you do think, and you just read the headlines, and you're like, wow, looks like legalization is coming. That's not how this is going to work. I've been surprised many times in this industry, both positively and negatively, on things that happen. So I would not rule anything out. But, as far as myself and MJBiz and most other people see this, this is one of those crucial steps towards the ultimate goal. And I think that when we look back, when and if this happens, when there's a significant federal change, we will turn to this and say, hey, this was one of those key building blocks to get us here. And that's how legislation works, and that's how it works in the cannabis industry. And we've seen it time and time again at the state level. It takes numerous efforts, and it's something starts with an idea, and then you see people talking about, lawmakers are talking about it, and then something's introduced in a committee, and maybe it's shot down, right? And then it finally works its way out of committee, and it only gets passed by one chamber of the House, or only discussed. And then you just build and build upon it. So that's where I see the significance of this. Is there's been a lot of real good thought behind it, and you can tell Schumer is not just talking out of his butt here, like coming up with things. He understands the industry because he's done the research, he's made the connections, and the other lawmakers involved as well. They're not kind of half-assing this. And I think that that's, to me, significant too, is that they're embracing a lot of the big issues that the industry has, and to make this successful. And it sounds like they've listened and they understand it. And so, I think that is one of the most remarkable things about this. Now, when we talk about what's good and what's bad, it really depends where you are. If you're operating a multi-state operator, big company in multiple states, you're going to have one view. If you're a mom and pop, you're going to have another. If you're a consumer or a patient, there's different things that are important to you all over the spectrum. So what I can say in general, though, is it's a thoughtful proposal on how we as a nation can turn this whole thing on its head finally from the federal level and look to legalize and regulate this in a responsible way.
Yeah, it was interesting. What I saw, one of the comments was like 70% of the US population now favors legalization of marijuana in one way or the other. I don't think anybody in DC has garnered 70% of their constituents voting in favor of them.
And you see that with all the ballot measures in each state. They're getting more support for legalization for medical and recreational than any of the candidates on the ballot or the presidential candidates. It's astonishing. It's clear that the vast majority of people are ready for change.
We had a couple of interesting things happen up here that I just want to share with you and get your impressions as to how it's might impact legalization. So 2016, Massachusetts legalized medical marijuana. When we went to legalize,
David, 2013 is when the medical program started.
2012, we legalized medical. 2016, we legalized rec. And the group that was most opposed initially to legalize recreational marijuana were the medical marijuana operators, because now they had the market to themselves. They didn't want to share it. We just have finally gotten home delivery off the ground. And when home delivery started, the Cannabis Control Commission decided the social equity applicants had really been sidelined in the industry, so they were giving them a 3-year head start. They'd have an exclusivity of those licenses. And amazingly, the entrenched operators came out against home delivery. Do you think that there's any segment of the market that's going to come out against federal legalization?
That's a great question. I think it depends what shape it takes, right? If you've got some bill out there and there's key provisions that certain people don't agree with, absolutely, they're not going to, I doubt there's many people who would oppose reform to federal marijuana laws. But there are segments that will say what's near and dear to them, and it might be social equity, it might be taxes, it might be big industry versus smaller, and the provisions around all this. You might have some that say, this isn't the bill that I support, and it's got to look different. And that is an issue, right? We've seen that on the state basis. We've seen that with federal proposals in the past. It's hard for the entire industry to coalesce around something because of all the competing interests. So I see this more as there will be opponents to the shape of the proposal, and they may be so strong, their opposition to it, that they say, I'd rather scrap this whole thing and wait a couple years until we come up with something better. I do think that could absolutely happen. And then I will say the illicit market may not support it at all. I mean, as legalization has taken root in states, in some cases, it's actually, the illicit market is doing better, unfortunately. But in others, they feel that they've been locked out of the real industry, and they don't have the skill set or the monies or the money or the business expertise to transition. And they say, well, it used to, even some people that are in the industry that grew out of the illicit market are like, hey, it was actually a better environment for me when it was, fully illegal in the state. So you might have people in that segment that oppose it.
I do want to ask a little bit about Senator Cory Booker. I loved his passion, his orator skills. He was awesome in that news conference, and yet he took some heat about his comment about safe banking. I think we all know that there's been other tries in our government to legalize cannabis. Isn't the big thing, the one thing that the industry really needs is to get it off Schedule 1, at least, if not completely descheduled? Isn't that the biggest thing?
I think it's an important thing, but you will even find differences in that and say, well, if it's just moved down on the Controlled Substances Act, away from Schedule 1, but to Schedule 2, that's bad. Like there are people who say, no, that's going to put it in the hands of pharmaceutical companies and these unfriendly regulations. So yeah, I think it depends on where you sit, and there is opposition to just kind of moving it down. Now, taking it off completely, I think, almost everyone, and I can't think of a reason why someone wouldn't support taking cannabis off the schedule of controlled substances.
And once it gets descheduled off 1, doesn't that open up banking and get rid of the 280E clause?
No.
Tell me, David.
Schedule 1 and Schedule 2.
Both. Okay.
You got to go below Schedule 2 to get rid of 280E.
So is there going to be wheel dealing in the halls of the Capitol here, Chris? Because let's face it, the political climate in Washington, D.C. is about as much of a stalemate as I've ever seen in my lifetime, maybe going back to the 60s where you had the pro-war and the anti-war people, and there was a line in the sand there.
Yeah, it's unfortunate the situation we're in, which throws all of this up in the air even further, is that the tension and the environment now is that lawmakers on each side don't want to support the other's causes for whatever reason, because they don't want to give them a win, or, it's like, that's where we're at. It's not about, and maybe it's never been about what's good for the people, who knows? And, politicians get a bad rap for many reasons, but I do think a lot of them are trying to do the right thing. But now this climate we're in, it's like, even if they might see the benefits of this one side, they don't want to hand the other side a victory that they have been making a big deal out of. Do the Republican leaders in Congress really want to hand Schumer this victory? So I don't know what is going to factor in just from that into whether people are going to support things, not just with cannabis, with anything, but especially with cannabis, because then you're handing what might be perceived as a victory to your opponent, who there's like hatred everywhere, for the other side, which is sad.
It's very sad. And you laugh because it's ridiculous. Okay. Yeah. It really is. And especially with a issue like cannabis, I think you even alluded to this earlier when you said, look, when you put cannabis on a ballot question, more people come out to vote than ever before, right? I mean, that's a fact. We don't get to argue that. Everybody agrees. Now you've got polls and you've got the populace basically saying, hey guys, figure out a way to get this thing done. And now you've got the polarization going. This is what bothers me about the United States of America. I just don't get it. We have some reason got the old, if you want it, I don't. And that is not America. If we don't figure out a way to talk to each other from across the aisle, we aren't going anywhere. And that's where we are right now. And it's so frustrating for those who can take a step back and look at the bigger picture. And now's the time to make it happen. Now, I am going to say this. We haven't put this up yet, but we do know that there is an email out there that they threw out at the news conference that they are asking for industry supporters to share and take a time to, write your response. Public discourse is good. And that's cannabis_reform at finance.senate.gov. I memorized it. And I also created an animation. At some point, we'll be throwing it up to get people to do it. Chris, what is the MJBiz? When are you guys going to respond publicly? Because you got till September 1st to do this.
We'll look into that and see if it fits. With the media backbone, we stay away from actual lobbying. We stay away from, opinions on things. We support the industry in many ways, but, like if we're going out with a subjective approach and we say, oh, it should be this, or the bill should be like this, that hurts someone else, right? So that's not really our role, but we support the organizations that do in various ways. And then we support the industry. This is up to the industry, to figure out. We can help foster that in things we do and help shed light on the issues and both sides and bring people together at our conference, to discuss it and forums to do that. But we shy away from taking positions on things.
Well, as a little media company that produces a few original programs, we do want to be the voice of the industry. So if the industry does want to have an opportunity to voice, by all means, find me, track me down, not difficult to do it, info@Pro Cannabis Media, and allow them to come on and talk about it. So again, let's talk a little bit about the event that's finally on the calendar in October. People are already calling me to say, hey, you going? Where'd you do? So tell us what's on the agenda. I think you guys actually sent out your agenda this week, and talk a little bit about some of the speakers that you already have lined up besides Chris Walsh's opening address.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I always give predictions there, and I put myself out there because it's hard to make predictions in this industry. So I can look like a buffoon sometimes if you predict something, it doesn't come true. But
by the way, I was in sports a long time. We learned don't predict, even though that's the nature of the beast. Go ahead.
And I understand that, and I still do it, but shame on me. But no, I mean, this was a long, hard, 16 months for everyone, right? In many ways, our whole business is based on, a big chunk of it is based on getting people together. So we put a lot of time and effort to coming out of this pandemic and hosting MJBizCon for the first time since 2019 live, put a lot of effort and resources into doing this well, doing it safely, and doing it right, and really getting back in touch with the industry about how things have changed and where the needs are for people, whether it's, education or getting their name out there or deal flow. So it's kind of all hands on deck, and we're seeing great traction so far, pacing ahead of 2019 in some key ways, which is great. We ultimately don't know where we'll end up, right? We've never come out of a pandemic in this situation like this before in my lifetime or in a business perspective. So to your point, we're hearing all the time about people who are excited, whether it's MJBizCon or another event, just to get out there and to get back in person. It's a fundamental part of this industry, and it's how people built their businesses more so than in other industries. So far, everything looks really promising, and we're ready to come roaring out of this and really get a critical mass of people there to let's talk about where this industry is going. Let's help shape it together. Let's talk about things like we're talking about on this show. What is the potential for federal legalization? What are the concerns? What are the benefits and drawbacks of different aspects of how this can unfold? And how will it ultimately affect all of us and our businesses now? And those are the kinds of discussions. Those are some of the sessions that we've worked into the agenda, along with, some more nitty gritty on how you can improve your yields and your grow operation and all those fundamental business things. What I think is super important this year is, while we'll have that element, it's really on the content side and education side about these bigger discussions, because we're at a pivotal point right now. And we need the leaders and decision makers and all the way down in the industry to the average professional to be part of this discussion. And we need to internally do what we're hoping the lawmakers do. I think we need to approach things with an open mind and find common ground on what we think are the most important things for the industry. Now, there's never going to be here's what the industry says, these are the 10 things, right? But I think we can gain understanding and acceptance and rally around what's truly important, some of those core pillars, and then communicate them as a whole, to the lawmakers that are ultimately going to decide where this goes.
Are we doing any polling to find out in the industry exactly what is the most important thing to the industry? Is it access to the banks? Is it just taking it off the scheduling process? What do you, is there anything in place for that as far as you know?
No, but that's a great idea. Whether we can incorporate something like that into MJBizCon, where we're going to get tens of thousands of people, and if we can get that critical mass of feedback, that's actually a great idea. So I'm going to talk to the team about how we can help foster that and identify where the industry stands. Thank you very much, Jimmy.
This is what I do, Chris, is I just sit around and think of great ideas all the time and
love it, and
then share them with the world, and everybody runs off and takes them. It doesn't bother me. I just want people to talk to each other. In fact, I think it's great how you are shaping, how you're looking at the convention, because if we could set the example for the Republicans and Democrats to actually talk about the issues, maybe we can find common ground as Americans. And that's one thing that I just want to see it happen. I can't believe I've seen it come this far. Yeah, at this point, I want to see it at least get decriminalized at the federal level and leave it up to the states. And you know what? If that's all it is, I can live with that. Can you live with that?
Yeah, let the states decide. If we can all agree on that and allow that to happen and bake that into federal law, I think we've taken a massive step. And lastly, I know we've got to move on, but I just want to say one of the things that gives me optimism and hope is that as legalization has spread, this is going into red states increasingly, right? So this was when we started in 2011, the most people in it, most people supporting it were what you call Democrats, liberals. It was very, very clear, right? Now it's diversifying. And I think the more people from different backgrounds, different political leanings, it's in their state, they're seeing the businesses, now they're involved in it, they're investing in it, they're starting businesses, they're working for businesses in it. You know, I think that is how we bridge this divide and we can get together at this level, no matter your political background, and agree on what's good for the public, what's good for the industry, and what should be in federal legalization. And hopefully that will ripple out to the federal picture.
Lastly, I would be remiss if I did not mention the passing of a California legend in the cannabis industry this past week, Frenchie Cannoli. Did you have any dealings with him at all?
We did several times over the years. Obviously a legend in the industry and big loss overall. And you know, he represented kind of the old school cannabis marijuana, you know, guy and business person. And now we're seeing this tension between the new business people coming in and the old school. And so, you know, he really represented the old school, and we're trying to find our way as an industry to make sure that what he stood for and what he did for the industry doesn't just disappear into the dustbin of history, and that it's embraced as we go forward. And hopefully, you know, in light of this sad news, you know, we can take what he did and incorporate it in and learn lessons from how can we bridge this with the like business Wall Street people coming in.
Yeah, there's quite a few of those out there in the cannabis space. It would be nice if we could create some kind of an award that goes to the Entrepreneur of the Year in the cannabis industry moving forward, because I haven't heard one negative comment about this guy from the California group over the last week or so since the news hit. So Chris Walsh, again, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you in the fall. How about a plug for your new podcast? Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I'm not the sales guy, even though I'm a CEO, but no, I started a new podcast, Seed to CEO, and we're aiming at the mainstream people coming in that are looking for their way in this business, looking to understand it, seeing where they might have opportunities. So talk to all these veterans. I talk to newbies who are successful in the industry and try and share their insights and advice.
There you go. And do you get that, David? Seed to CEO. Did you figure that one out?
I did, Jimmy.
All right. Terrific. Chris Walsh, thanks so much. It's just past 4:20. We're going to take our first break. We've got some other great media representatives coming on to this program, including Bruce Barcott, the editor of Leafly, coming up at 5 o'clock. So don't go away. We'll continue with Green Rush Live after this.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, you know, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. There's nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works. It's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard. It's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm going to sit down in my rented car. I'm going to jam it into drive. I'm going to head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And you know, when I started Pro Cannabis Media 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure the cannabis industry had a professional outlet to share their stories in their own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, cannabis has saved my life, cannabis has changed my life. Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically get one of our t-shirts with that closing line I use all the time, it's a whole new world of weed. But as the legendary Billy Mays used to say, that's not all. One of those finalists will win one of these really cool full-story cannabis storage units. It's a great way to store your cannabis in their food-grade aluminum containers. It's award-winning, child-proof, smell-proof, and has a solid contemporary design. It's a $220 value, but you can win one if we pick your story and feature it on our show. Yes, we will pick one of those 5 finalists, and they will receive this $220 value absolutely free. Now, we ask you to keep your story to under 90 seconds on video and less than 500 words in text. So come out of the cannabis closet and tell us your story, and you could win with yourstory.com. Just go on to procannabismedia.com and sign up today. You might even join us on one of our shows. All right, welcome back to the second half hour of Green Rush Live, a program we live stream every Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern Time here on the Pro Cannabis Media Network. I'm Jimmy Young, the host of the show, and I'm always joined by my friend and sidekick,
David Rabinovitz.
There he goes. He does that so well now. I'm so proud of him. Do you know people are actually comparing us to Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon on the chat room? Did you see that, David?
Yeah, but Jimmy, I don't get to run around and hand out the big checks.
I can do a great Karnak imitation, but you know what? That'll probably alienate some of our audience anyway. Let's bring in our panelists for this particular half hour, and one in particular is still on hold, or we're efforting tracking him down. But we do want to welcome Mike Lomuto. He's the Director of Equity Inclusion for the NCIA, the National Cannabis Industry Association. Mike is with us, as well as Alex Halperin. He's the editor and publisher of WeedWeek. And if you don't subscribe to WeedWeek, I think you should, if you really want to keep your eye and mind on the cannabis industry. So guys, thank you so much for joining us today. And I think the first thing I'm going to ask both of you is, can you give us a reaction from the filing of the federal bill from last Wednesday? You know, there's a lot of skeptics out there. But, you know, if you go for the big enchilada, if you end up with a little hors d'oeuvre, a little piece, it's still a win. So Mike, how do you view this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great that it's now in the conversation the way that it is. I think that, you know, seeing the Senate actually take the lead on this is a huge deal. And so, you know, where we're going to get to is anybody's guess right now. But the fact that we're moving forward in this way is really encouraging.
And Alex, you get to have your next comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, it's definitely historic that the Senate majority leader is endorsing cannabis legalization. This is a very exciting thing, but it's still got a ways to go. It's going to a lot of sausage making yet to happen, it seems.
That's right. And guys, we both know the political situation in Washington, D.C. And, you know, again, I think that is one of the reasons why the excitement has been muted a tad, because nobody thinks the Republicans and Democrats can get anything done. I mean, it took them 160 years to figure out that slavery was a bad thing, and maybe we should have a federal holiday for that. I mean, you know, that is what boggles the mind in my environment anyway, up here. If there's one item on this particular legislative bill that's up for public discussion, is it the descheduling that's the most important factor here? Mike, what's your feeling about that?
I mean, whether it's the most important factor in this bill, I'm not sure, but I think it's definitely an important factor. I think that one of the things that concerns me, to your point about the Republicans and Democrats working together, is, you know, how long is it going to take for this thing to go through? And is it possible to do anything incremental in between now and then, such as, for example, descheduling on its own or safe banking on its own? Because it's very possible that this could take a really long time to go through. And there's a lot of people in jail or being put in jail still because of the way that it's scheduled. And there's a lot of people unable to bank because of the way it's scheduled. So, yeah, that's what I would say about that.
So, Cory, if I may say, Cory Booker, a senator from New Jersey, who's prepared the bill with Senator Schumer, has sort of had different points of view on sort of a compromise bill that would allow banking. But I don't quite understand his position. Does anybody?
Yes, 100%. He's all about social injustice. He's fighting for the black man, the people that have been most impacted by the war on drugs. I give him a lot of credit for not just looking at the banking part and saying, you know what, this is a social justice bill, not just about the dollars and cents.
Okay.
All right. Does that help?
Well, I'm not sure, because I know a lot of folks in the industry would love to see a banking bill, and Cory Booker seems to be saying, well, that's probably not going to happen. And I know that from an equity perspective, a lot of the businesses that are receiving legs up thanks to equity programs in the States, they want banking to happen too. So banking is an equity issue too, because some of the big companies, they're better equipped to deal with the impositions of not being able to use the regular banking system, but they have the resources to deal with it, whereas small mom and pop businesses don't.
Right. Well, that's on the debt side, right? Everybody has to get a depository account, and most operators find it somewhere. The big guys can go into the markets and raise money. The little guys are stuck. If you can't find the investors to put it up, it's hard to get a conventional loan.
Yeah, it's just about impossible to get a conventional loan. And so not having banking is not just about not being able to do banking, which costs a lot of extra money for a small business. It's a bigger percentage of your bottom line at the end of the day for a small business, small mom and pop, but you also have trouble accessing the capital that you need in order to get going in the first place. not only from banks, but a lot of people just won't deal with you. A lot of investors won't deal with you when they can't go through their normal channels themselves either. So yeah, definitely a concern.
Mike, do you have any views on the social equity side, restorative justice side of the proposed bill?
So, we're still kind of putting that together, still going through everything. Right now, we're soliciting feedback from our social equity members at the NCIA, as well as our DEI committee, to get their input on kind of overall, like all the different pieces that are specifically social equity related, as well as the pieces that might not seem to be social equity related, but that definitely have an impact. So I don't really have a take on it yet, but we're definitely trying to source that from within our member base.
Cool.
What other things are you working on, Mike, as far as the diversity initiative? One of the things, and again, you're going to know exactly who Chris Webber is, which I love because you are indeed a sports fan. He put out some money that he wants those that have been most impacted by the war on drugs to have an opportunity to get to. Now, I have not had the time to track any of that down. Do you have any idea of other funds that might be out there for availability for social equity applicants to perhaps get the capital that they need just to get going with it?
Yeah, I mean, these things are starting to come more and more online, right? And some of it's coming from the private sector, like from Chris Webber, and some of it's also coming through some of these social equity programs. The problem with some of the social equity programs has been in the disbursement, and like in places like San Francisco, there's still a lot of red tape that they're trying to figure out for how social equity applicants can actually access that money. There's also trade associations, such as in Michigan, that have started putting together their funds to help social equity applicants be able to get themselves launched as well. But Michigan is also having its own red tape issues too. So I think that, in my opinion, the Chris Webber type funds are really the godsend right now that we need in the industry to be able to access money privately, because the public money is still a little bit more hung up with red tape. So that's what we're seeing right now.
And Alex, can I ask you about California, please? Big state, first one out there to do medical back in the mid 90s. But they've really kind of, hit a wall once they went to adult use recreation. It's a bit of a mess in that state, isn't it?
Well, it is the biggest industry out there,
Right.
but the industry's really struggled for a lot of different reasons. So everything from acts of God, like wildfires and stuff like that, which really creates immense complications, to a complicated industry with 3 separate regulatory bodies. And so I know Governor Newsom just set up the Department of Cannabis Regulation, I believe, or anyway, one state agency that's going to oversee the whole industry, like a lot of other states have. And my impression is that folks in the industry are cautiously optimistic about it, but we'll see.
And of course, California is certainly a very unique entity in that fact that 80% of the legacy market in the United States comes out of the Emerald Triangle. That alone can upset the apple cart as an industry tries to go legitimately legal with testing and regulations and licenses. And this kind of lends me into our next discussion about the issue of growing cannabis at home. And it has been part of the legislative process in a few states. Some states allow it, some states do not. The fact that it is available as a medicine, and if you need it that bad and you can't afford to buy as much as you need for medicine, don't you think you have the right to grow a plant in your backyard? To me, it makes perfect sense, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should be able to grow our own food. We should be able to grow our own medicine. It's plants, and having something else to say about that is that having a direct relationship with that plant that you've grown in your backyard, in your closet, and that you're going to consume as medicine, and also maybe share with your family, your friends. I think there's something very intimate about that and very dynamic about that is also kind of left out of this because we end up just discussing kind of the technicalities of it all. But really, this is a plant, and it's something that is about, connecting and communing with nature. And I'm not trying to sound too, hippie-ish here, but it's really important to recognize that and being able to have our rights maintained.
Don't be knocking my friends, the hippies. Okay, come on. I'm old enough to remember them and hang out with them. All right.
Yeah, definitely not knocking the hippies. Definitely not knocking the hippies. Yeah.
Fair enough. And Alex, tell me your impressions of what you think is going on with the home grow as an issue in the legislative process.
So I'm not sure what the new federal bill says about home grow. Actually,
I don't think the federal bill has. I know they're more concerned about the amount of THC in the plant than actually growing the plant, which is another issue we can certainly talk about.
I do know there's some companies, and sometimes they've sort of said this, and then there's a lot of blowback, so they sort of say it quietly. But home grow, which seems like a reasonable thing for people to be able to do if cannabis is legal. But it also has the potential to really cut into revenues for companies. And so some of them are pretty wary of it. I don't know how many people actually would do that, but there have been surveys that say if given the chance to grow their own cannabis, 20% of Americans or 20% of American adults would do that. I don't think that number is exact, but pretty substantial numbers. So that would be a lot of revenue lost by the companies. And it shows that their interests aren't necessarily always aligned with those of users.
At the same time, though, I mean, with home brewing, right? I don't know that cuts into the market, right? It's like you become more enthusiastic, maybe more likely to go buy another type of, yeast or whatever it may be. And that's a whole nother marketplace that gets created. And then also being enthusiastic about other home brews or other craft brews or craft grows comes out of that kind of, again, that communion you grow with the plant by growing it yourself. So I think that, it's a little short-sighted of these companies to do that. I agree with you 100% that that's what they're motivated by, but I think they're not really looking at the bigger picture of people being enthusiastic about this. And as a result, probably spending more money on it.
No, I agree. I mean, it's a really good point that it can get people into it. It creates its own markets and stuff like that. Just some of the companies don't necessarily see it that way. Maybe they're afraid people will grow better stuff at home.
And those of us who have black thumbs, okay, who kill plants, that's the only reason why I make that reference, okay? I don't want to have that responsibility. Let's just say I dole out a few dollars to get some seeds, right? On that gray market that you can find on the internet. I love when people describe it as the gray market. Come on, the internet's pretty much open to anybody. That being said, that pressure of knowing that I've got, a couple of $100, invested in these little seeds means I have to remember to water it, make sure it has enough food, make sure there's enough light. Oh, wait, too much light would be a bad thing too. So, I mean, that's a lot of responsibility. And okay, I'm a little lazy too, right? Yeah. I admit it, right? So I'd much rather go to a store and get tested product rather than take on that responsibility myself. But then again, yes, I have a medical card, but I'm not one who needs the maximum amount allowed for those who really, really do use a lot of the THC to help them through, whether it's a cancer treatment or any kind of debilitating situation where you're on or trying to stay off opioids.
Anyway. Jimmy, also keep in mind, every New Year's Eve, think of how many people say, my New Year's resolution is I'm going to lose 30 pounds, 40 pounds. I'm going to go to a gym. They buy equipment. They join Planet Fitness. And then after 3 weeks, they stop showing up. I think a lot of that 20% who says, I'll grow it at home, they're going to fall into the same bucket. I'm absolutely going to grow it at home until it comes time to actually go get the seeds and start watering the plants. And then they're going to go, I think the local dispensary is a lot easier.
Well, definitely easier.
Jimmy, did you grow it?
No, never have.
Oh.
Never have. Guys, I went through depression when I had to put down my hibiscus this year. Okay. I mean, I'm not sure I can handle that. I really don't. I'm a way too sensitive a guy to handle having a life form in my hands like that and what have you. Let me ask the question here about the THC content and controls on that. isn't that created by people who just don't understand that it isn't about the amount of THC as much as it is the other things like those terpenes that dictate the intensity of the THC? And by the way, because it affects everybody differently, why should the legislative process even be concerned about the amount of THC in this plant that's for sale? Mike, do you agree with that? Or how do you feel about the limiting? I think New York actually has a drag on THC, or they're going to charge you more if it's packed with the THC.
Yeah, I definitely think that the THC conversation debate is, I don't know if archaic is the right word, but I think it's a little bit misplaced. There's a lot of cannabinoids. They all affect each other differently. They affect different people differently. And some people need higher THC and also need a different type of blend with cannabinoids and terpenes. And just looking at it through this one chemical, I get that with alcohol, it's just one primary active ingredient. With cannabis, it's a little bit different. So looking at and judging it that way, it gets you in a really kind of a gray area, I believe. Yeah.
What about you, Alex? Do you think we should be putting limitations on THC content in plants?
Well, I try, as a journalist, I try not to have opinions, or at least share opinions. But I will say that I think that whether it's oversimplified or not, folks who are opposed to legalization, they really haven't made much traction anywhere that I've seen. But this seems like an area where they could have a little more traction. And it's something maybe the industry needs to make the case for.
Yeah. Let me put my professor of media hat on for you, Alex. When you're on this show, you're here as a talk show host, okay? We want Alex Halperin, the person, to not be afraid to share his opinions, because you're not writing a story. This is a completely different role for you. I want you to relax and let it flow, guy.
Okay. Well, I'll say the industry needs to watch out for this, because this is something that I think a lot of parents are going to be sensitive to, and they may not understand all the nuances of the plant and stuff like that, but they do understand the sort of gist of the idea, and they may be more supportive of this and then outright prohibition.
Yeah, I get you. And that's good. Well done, by the way. That was very well done. Being a talk show host, sometimes you have to be on the fence of opinions. It's very important to look at both sides of these opinions, and you throw it out there. There's one guy in sports talk radio. Mike, have you ever heard of Glenn Ordway in Boston? He's probably the most professional talk show host in the East Coast for many, many years. I think he's retiring this year, but he had a reputation of being on the fence, and that's what helped him generate calls, because both sides wanted to attack him, right? And what does that do? Raises your ratings. That's commercial radio. That's how it works, folks. Hey, Alex, you talked about parents, right? One of my biggest beefs over the long time that I've been doing this show now, what has it been? Almost a year, David, right? September, I think we started this in 2020, didn't we?
Yeah, it was sometime around then.
Yeah, it was in September. Is how to talk to your kids about cannabis. And the comparison to alcohol is also reflected in this bill. They're trying to regulate it, and give it to the powers of the Alcoholic Beverage Commission. That kind of fits. That's my model all along, is when I talk to people who just don't get it, I say, well, let's talk about alcohol first. You're certainly familiar with that substance, and the infatuation with the THC content in plants is typical of this too. It's like the proof in alcohol. There's 22% THC in this plant. Well, you know what? I've had flower with 22% THC in it, and guess what? It doesn't freaking work. Okay. So, it's like, or it works for 15 minutes or whatever. The point is, using alcohol as the analogy is probably the best way to start the conversation with your children. What's your view of this, guys? And I don't even know if either one of you are parents. Mike, are you a parent by any chance?
No.
Not that you know of, right?
Not that I know of.
How to do that.
Exactly.
Alex, are you a parent?
No.
Okay.
No.
So down the road, when it comes time, if you will, I actually think this is a great opportunity for parents to talk to their kids about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You might as well throw it in there, right? Because you have to have that conversation with young people at age 12 or 13, because those are the magic years when, you've turned from the kid to the bar mitzvah boy. David, if you don't mind me making that reference, right? Right? All right.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, Jimmy, just
Good.
throwing here, I was like 7 when I found out that my dad consumed, right? And it was medicine to him.
Yep.
And, the conversation wasn't anywhere near about the parallel with alcohol. It was about it being medicine. The conversation was also about the prohibition of it and the fact that, this medicine wasn't allowed by the government. So I needed to make sure not to talk to people about it. That's definitely changed now, and we can talk about it more now in a lot of states because it is more legal. But I think that, what I would like to see is those conversations. Yes, okay, responsible use, comparing it to alcohol, but also talking about the medicine of it. I think really, to me, shaped completely how I think about it and how I've thought about it my whole life, and how I think about plants being medicine my whole life, because my dad started at a young age by making that connection with me and understanding that it was medicine and it was a plant.
That's a great story. That is a great story, and it's not the first time I've heard from a adult child of a parent who can articulate that. So that was terrific. Alex, should it be under the Alcohol Beverage Commission as far as at the federal level? Would you be comfortable with them being the grand poobah of cannabis in the United States?
I'm not sure I know enough to answer the question. I mean, there is going to be somebody who regulates it at the federal level. I think that's probably not going to be avoided. And so a lot of the state governments have done a pretty good job regulating cannabis, whether they're blue states, red states, purple states. So, I mean, my feeling is that somebody's going to regulate it, and I can't necessarily speak to the body they're sort of proposing to create, or the body they want to bring it into. But I mean, certainly the proposed taxes are quite high, and are probably, as many in the industry have said, are going to push folks back to the illegal market.
Oh, no doubt. A 25% federal tax on top of the state taxes too. That's a tad hefty, but at least you're getting a legal tested product. But I agree. You're right that there'll always be that legacy market out there, that it will be available to people if they want it. They're just going to be, this is all about a new industry that's feeling its way through a modern era that, we're in uncharted territory. David, I certainly respect your opinion about bureaucracy and government. Is the Alcohol Beverage Commission the right federal group to perhaps oversee cannabis?
That's a tough question, because cannabis and alcohol are going to bang heads hard. If you talk to the Mass Package Store Association, their members are feeling the pinch, right? You have enough alcohol to really get a little woozy. You wake up the next morning, you may still feel it. You vape a little bit of weed, you wake up the next morning fine. Right? No calories. Nobody's ever died from weed, but we got a lot of people who die from alcohol. So I think that they're going to become two competing forces, and putting them under the same umbrella may be challenging.
Did either one of you see any of the stories on NBC television last week when they weren't promoting the Olympics? They actually had some pretty interesting stories about cannabis on the Today Show and the nightly news. Did either one of you see any of that by any chance? Does anybody watch television anymore? Right?
Just sports.
The only show we watch is this one.
Sports. I'm with you on the sports thing, Mike. Right? I get that. All right. Well, they visited the University of Mississippi for a feature, okay? And they talked to the guy who'd been in that chair of running that only approved federal regulated cannabis. He'd been in that job for 40 years. And he took us into the freezer where they've been storing the cannabis. Okay. And, for those in the industry who understand how to take care of it and treat it with the respect that it is, it was a little sobering, to say the least, to see the fact that they're holding on to this. It's like grass clippings. It you know what I mean? It's not real. It's not real. And it isn't even worthy of being researched. If there is another thing that I am hoping for that comes out of this, besides access to capital for social equity applicants, besides the descheduling and the opening of the banks and getting rid of the 280E, all of those things, this is where I'd like to see some of the changes made. And, how are we ever going to break down the stigma, right? If we can't research it. Mike, I'm sure the industry is all over that, right?
Yeah, I mean, research is so key, right? Research and education. That's how we really are going to break these stigmas. I couldn't agree with you more.
There you go. And Alex, any last comments, and then you guys get to plug your organizations.
Well, I'll just say I didn't see the clip, but I have seen an interview with the guy who runs the grow at the University of Mississippi, and he sort of defended it. And he was like, "No, we're doing a pretty good job." And I felt for the guy. I mean, he's growing by sort of probably very strict regulated practices. He's not able to grow what most consumers consider cannabis, and perhaps it has been effective for some of what it's supposed to do. So I haven't tried the cannabis grown at the University of Mississippi, and I have no doubt it's not as good as consumers expect. But at the same time, I respect the guy and his work for doing that.
There you go. Well, he certainly was dedicated to it, and that much I respect him for. Mike, you want to give a plug for the NCIA, one of our favorite associations?
Yeah. So let's see. We're looking forward to really weighing in with our perspectives once we collect everything from our members on all this federal legalization. That's something we're working on right now. Really soliciting that from our member base. We have a couple of conferences coming up this year too. So September 22nd and 23rd in Michigan, the Midwestern Cannabis Conference. If you're in the area, definitely come check it out. The big conference, of course, is going to be CBS Cannabis Business Summit in December in San Francisco. And yeah, we're doing a lot of great work with social equity, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. And if anybody's interested, just please reach out. You can find us at thecannabisindustry.org. And please reach out. Yeah, thanks.
There you go.
Thanks
no
for
problem.
having me.
And WeedWeek, you can subscribe whenever you want, right, Alex? How do they find you? How do they find you?
Yeah, subscribe to us. We're to our twice a week newsletter at weedweek.net. And we've got some great new features. We just unveiled a redesign, and the newsletter's free. And we think we have the most influential and best looking audience in cannabis. So join them.
There you go. All right. Alex Halperin from WeedWeek and Mike Lomuto from NCIA.
Thanks
you
so much for having
joining us here on Green Rush Live. We're going to take our break and come back on the other side. Don't go away.
Difference is building a solution for that individual, not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the costs low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
So I think there's one very important difference between me and most of my team members and other cannabis accounting firms, especially outsourced cannabis accounting firms. With a lot of the other firms, you're going to find bookkeepers. or folks that were accountants for their entire career, but they were junior accountants. I've spent most of my career alongside CFOs at public companies, companies with thousands of employees, public companies. So much of my career wasn't spent in the debits and credits. It was spent with the CFO, CEO, COO of large public companies, working on strategy, working on planning and big initiatives, working on projects such as mergers and integrations. So that high level experience, along with being able to do the debits and credits and having members of my team that also have fairly senior experience, and also members of the team that are junior and can do the bookkeeping at a little bit lower cost than some of the people with the experience, gives our clients a much broader depth of experience than a lot of the other firms where you're hiring someone that is just a bookkeeper and can't help with the strategy side of it, or someone that's been an executive for a long time and can only help with the strategy but can't help with the hands-on.
Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And you know, when I started Pro Cannabis Media 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure the cannabis industry had a professional outlet to share their stories in their own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, cannabis has saved my life, cannabis has changed my life. Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically get one of our t-shirts with that closing line I use all the time, "It's a whole new world of weed." But as the legendary Billy Mays used to say, that's not all. One of those finalists will win one of these really cool full-story cannabis storage units. It's a great way to store your cannabis in their food-grade aluminum containers. It's award-winning, child-proof, smell-proof, and has a solid contemporary design. It's a $220 value, but you can win one if we pick your story and feature it on our show. Yes, we will pick one of those 5 finalists, and they will receive this $220 value absolutely free. Now, we ask you to keep your story to under 90 seconds on video and less than 500 words in text. So come out of the cannabis closet and tell us your story, and you could win with yourstory.com. Just go on to procannabismedia.com and sign up today. You might even join us on one of our shows. All right, welcome back to Green Rush Live here at Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, and I'm always joined by my good friend,
David Rabinovitz.
And there he is. And we're so happy to have other friends in our Zoom room this afternoon so we can talk a little bit about this federal bill and what's going on in the world of cannabis. One shouldn't need too much introduction for those who may perhaps follow Pro Cannabis Media, and our subscriber base is growing exponentially every day. We appreciate that. Tara Misu Sargente runs the Blazin Bakery. That's the name of her show. She joins us from New Jersey. And as we like to do on all of our Pro Cannabis Media programs, we like to go coast to coast. So who better to reach out to than in the great Northwest, the editor of Leafly.com. It's Bruce Barcott and the author of Weed the People. Bruce, thank you again for coming in today.
Great to be back here, Jimmy.
So I'm going to start with you, Bruce, right off the bat. What's your reaction to the federal bill? I mean, there are a lot of things out there. It's really a home run, but I think everybody recognizes that you start there in a negotiation and hopefully somewhere you live in the middle or leaning one way or the other. How do you see this going?
I was actually pleasantly surprised with the bill to see when it came out, all 163 pages of it. It was so funny when it came out, all of us were just like scrambling to read through it and everything. But, a lot of the social justice measures were in it. It basically struck me as sort of the MORE Act Plus or the MORE Act 2.0. A lot of things from the MORE Act were embedded in the new consumer bill. But I think one of the things that immediately was a concern for a lot of folks in the cannabis industry is that federal tax rate, which starts at 10%, but then ramps up to 25%. And that is like, we knew there was going to be some sort of federal tax. But to me, that's a little concerning given that state taxes are already very high. And one of the goals here is to move people from the illicit market where it's untaxed to the licensed market where, we all need to pay a bit of tax.
That's right. And of course, everybody wants to get their piece of the pie or the piece of their bud, Bruce. So, isn't that what the political game's all about? But Tara, he mentioned Senator Cory Booker, who comes from New Jersey, your neck of the woods. He is adamant about making this a social justice bill, not just about the banking, and, actually took a little heat for his passion. What's your reaction to Senator Booker and how passionate he is about that?
Yes, and to also build on what Bruce said, I feel like if 25% is where someone wants to end up, we do need to get rid of the illicit or the legacy market, however you want to refer to it. But we do want people in a regulated market getting clean products. And I think the way to do that is to start out slow with the tax, and if we want to increase it, but really if we start out high, I think we're just going to drive that market. But so what's going on in New Jersey, I've seen happen before in New Jersey, what's going on with Cory Booker, I should say, is, we had legalization we wanted to get across the line. And the decriminalization bill was kind of simultaneously on the table. And what everyone said is, don't support the decrim bill because what people are going to say is that's good enough. And then that's going to hurt legalization because the people who are on the fence, we're not giving them an all or nothing choice anymore. We're saying, let's keep it completely illegal or let's legalize. But if we give them the soft kind of decrim, some people are going to do that. We might not get our majority. So I feel like that's what he is saying with this. I always come from a position of progress, not perfection. I think anything we're doing to move the industry along benefits everyone. And something they're saying is, well, if we only do the more, the MORE Act, the safe banking, whatever the financial end of this, giving us banking in the industry, then we're going to just support big business. But I don't think that's true. In a lot of ways, small businesses get hit even harder with these tax laws because they don't have the backing. So I understand what he's doing. He wants an all or nothing. We get social justice. We get the full bill. If we just give people banking, it's going to soften our case. So while I do understand the game they're playing, I think when we play these games, it does end up hurting people in the long run. I'm optimistic for the bill, as I always am, but cautiously optimistic, where I think something like a banking bill will probably hit critical mass now to go across the line. So it's a little disappointing to see that delayed.
Bruce, what was your reaction to Cory Booker's in the news conference, basically saying he would lay down to make sure that it's not just the banking bill?
I actually like that.
So did I.
And here's why. I think that 3 years ago, I remember when advocates in New York State came out and very strongly said, you know what, no legalization without equity measures in the bill. And that was a little bit daring. And I remember like writing and editing articles on that at the time. And it was like, oh, wow, that's bold. I don't know if they'll get it or not. Well, 3 years later, essentially that's become the standard. And I think that needs to we need to maintain that standard and move it forward a little bit. If we essentially pass this, Booker Schumer bill that essentially like takes away a lot of the banking issues. And one of the things that it also takes away is that IRS Rule 280E, which just kills like businesses like Terra's. And one of the things I've heard talk about is whether the removal of 280E might offset in a little way that high federal tax. I still don't think it should be that high on the federal tax side, but that's an interesting sort of balance that in terms of the business owners and people who are making payrolls every week might see a little bit of balance benefit there.
Yeah. And I do agree that the social justice aspect of any legalization bill is vital. I fear that we've had so many false starts on a federal level that to start getting momentum could maybe lead to where I feel like we just keep getting these blanket things that are shot down. But of course, and that is a huge part of New Jersey bill. I think we did some really great social equity causes here, aside from set-asides, micro license. We just, forwarded expungement greatly in New Jersey. So it's really important we do get those things on a federal level. But, we're not even at the halfway point with legalization. So it just worries me that we won't get there in time.
Uh-oh. I got the still photo of Tara up there. Oh, no, I thought that was like a warning. Does that mean your battery's dying?
No, my phone gave me an alert and it prioritized that.
And you know how to do that.
I went to dismiss it and it hit it. It was
all right. Bruce, I want to talk to you about a specific thing in the bill which puts the onus of control under the Alcoholic Beverage Commission. Is that a comfortable federal agency for you, looking at it from a cannabis perspective?
Far better than the Department of Justice, frankly. And I think also, putting it under what you want to call it ABC seems much more appropriate, because I really believe that federal regulation is going to be actually minimal. It's really going to fall to the states. I really believe, like, essentially under this bill, it's going to be up to each state to regulate cannabis, just like they do with alcohol. I mean, when we got rid of alcohol prohibition, essentially the federal government said, we're out, states, you handle it however you want. And so we are going to have, I think 50 different rule systems. But, the upside is that we will be able to have interstate commerce, which means you don't have to grow cannabis in Rhode Island, or, you can take some of that surplus from Oregon and actually move it where the market is, which is amazing. Will be an amazing thing.
God, it sounds like capitalism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So what's that going to do to the market when that happens? Because I've been a staunch proponent of the position that there's a lot of cultivators that are going to indoor cultivators that are going to go out of business, because you can't. I don't see how. And I've listened to all the arguments. I'm just not persuaded that you can grow a plant of this size indoors economically and compete with somebody who's going to grow it outdoors.
I agree. I mean, I agree. And at the same, and I am cognizant of those growers who are like legacy growers. They have put in the time and the years. At the same time, there's like the part of my brain that's like, we don't grow corn in New Jersey. It's,
Right.
Right. Bruce, you're so right. Dan, you're so right. I have been saying this to people. No one listens, because growers are super passionate, and cultivation, everyone thinks, is the golden ring of licenses. And I tell people, no, it's not, because we're in New Jersey. We have some astronomical property taxes. You can't do it outdoor. Greenhouse is not economical. So when you're looking at indoor, then you're looking at, we don't get an agricultural tax here. It's so unsustainable. And as soon as it goes federal, I tell people we're going to be growing this down in Virginia next to the tobacco. And once it goes international, we're going to be growing this next to the cocaine in Colombia. I mean, you're already seeing cannabis conventions out in Colombia. This is not a long-term sustainable proposition, and it's a commodity. And right now, I've heard they're producing this up in Canada for a nickel a gram. So unless we're talking talking about ultra craft cannabis, which maybe comparing it to the liquor market, there's some room for that. I mean, I'm really pessimistic on the people who are seeking these cultivation licenses in a state like New Jersey, where the costs are just so high. Yeah.
A couple of years ago, we had an issue in Massachusetts where the convenience stores wanted to change the law for carry-out liquor licenses. And carry-out liquor licenses are what controls how many marijuana stores get cited in a municipality. It's a 20% ratio. So, and I've been amazed, just building on what you're saying, at how many people think that indoor cultivation is going to survive. So I looked at the issue of, I started to talk to people in liquor stores, and I asked them on wine, because I thought it might be comparable to marijuana. How much really high-end wine do you sell? And I heard the same thing over and over. The high end of the wine market is like 3% of their revenue. It's rare, gets sold around holiday time, and 70% of the wine they sell is like up to $25 a bottle. And I believe the cannabis market is going to be the same way. So the people who are growing really high-end product, I say that folks in Massachusetts, you grow high-end product and it's a $2 billion market, you may be only looking at a $60 million segment of that market.
You're not going to only have, I mean, indoor weed is incomparable cannabis to outdoor. But when we're looking at extraction, you don't need to have that high craft level. So I really just think it's going to be in places where property is dirt cheap, where you can have these 100 square foot, 1,000 square foot facilities. And it's not New Jersey. And there will be a market for craft cannabis because expensive cannabis doesn't really hit that level that expensive wine does. But so I definitely think you're right to some point. But commercial cultivation is going to get really expensive. Bruce, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I agree, and I think that we mentioned New Jersey or Virginia earlier, and my mind goes immediately to Kentucky. Kentucky, even way back, we kind of knew about Kentucky hemp and tobacco and this sort of thing. And states like that, where it has been so outlawed for so long, I think are going to come in and it will, growers in some states are going to be hurt. New growers in other states are going to, their industry is going to blossom. And I don't think that we can stop that. I do think that each state can affect its retail. That's what it has control over. But in terms of who grows it, for better or worse, I think that is ultimately in the hands of the market and the soil and the sun and water supply.
Right. When they deschedule marijuana, legalize it at the federal level, I think the greatest benefactor is going to be JetBlue, because everybody in the Northeast is going to be on an airplane out to California to find legal growers.
Hey, that's called free market, isn't it, guys?
Yeah.
I mean, David, that's what you want, right?
Yeah.
I do want to ask, since I have Tara and I know that she's at an event, I want to ask this question. Because I got enlightened to it yesterday as I prepare for our weekly news show. It has to do with women in the C-level of the cannabis industry. And there was a number, it wasn't too long ago, that there was as many as 37% of C-level executives that were female in the cannabis industry. And now it's down to 8, Tara.
Yep. Because we are being used, bought, and disposed of. The tragic thing about these set-asides for both women, minorities, and veterans is that people will pay a woman or minority who looks good, who checks a box, $10,000 maybe, get their license, and it's nothing against white guys. Some of my best friends are white guys, but it goes to a rich white guy in another state who just did it to check a box, got a resident, got a female, got a minority. So those numbers were false. You were seeing people on applications, people out the gate who were CEOs, and then they got the license and the real person steps in. But if you want to talk about realistic numbers, you can count on your fingers the genuinely owned woman minority dispensaries in America. And 97% of VC money in cannabis goes to men. So the woman participation is a lot of it in the CBD, small business space, minority ownership, or straight out straw man situations, which is pretty unfortunate.
Bruce, I got to get your reaction to that because you've been around this space longer than anybody here on the call. Is that a bad trend? Do we need to enlighten some of our fellow old white guys to embrace some females, please?
Absolutely. I'm actually our CEO at Leafly. Yoko is obviously is a woman, and she's fantastic. We're thriving under her. I just love working for her. But the numbers all over in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion are terrible in the cannabis industry. We just did a report called Seeds of Change that came out, and one of the most astonishing pieces of data we came across was that Black people make up 14% of the U.S. population. About 5% of Black Americans have some form of equity in U.S. businesses, whether that's stock or ownership or co-ownership. And in cannabis, I think it's around 2% or less. So as bad as it is like nationwide, it's even twice as bad in the cannabis industry. And we looked at some of those factors, and a lot of those factors are exactly what Tara was talking about. They're the financiers, who's funding businesses, who controls venture capital, who controls the investment dollars that entrepreneurs are looking for and need to get their companies up and running, because there are no bank loans. I mean, one of the most hopeful parts of the new bill in Congress is the idea that there will be actually mandated like small business loans for folks to come into the industry. That's like, yes, we desperately need that.
Yeah. Again, there's so many aspects of this bill that you look at and go, well, this makes sense. Well, this makes sense. And then you've got the Republicans and Democrats who really can't agree on, whether to turn the lights on or not. I mean, it's just bizarre to me how we're going to actually get these two sides to talk to each other and do what's right for the populace that put them in those positions in the first place. Bruce, are you confident at all that something's going to get done here?
I'm at 1%. I just want to say thank you.
All right.
I'm going to cut out any second. Thank you for the opportunity. Bruce, it was great meeting you.
Great meeting you.
Yeah.
And Tara, thank you for all your support over the last few months, and we'll continue to wave that flag for Blazin Bakery, I promise. There she goes. All right.
Back to your question, Jimmy, like with Congress and this bill, this cannabis actually is one of those rare issues, and this is one of the reasons I love it so much. It's one of those rare issues where the bipartisan divide doesn't matter as much. It's still there, obviously, the red-blue divide. But I really have seen, especially we've seen it in state legislatures, you can reach individual politicians on either side of the aisle individually. But you've got to reach them one by one. I mean, believe me, there are plenty of Democrats in the Senate. Anybody over the age of 50 in the Senate who's a Democrat, it looks at this bill like they know it's the right thing to do, but they really don't want to touch it. They really don't want to be seen as voting for marijuana. And you have respected, revered ancients like Dianne Feinstein from California, who is like the Democratic standard bearer in California, right? But she can't stand legalization, right? It's difficult, but I really do think we can reach members of the Senate on both sides and don't just look for votes of the Democrats, because they're not all going to be there.
Yeah, I look at it as they have to deal with the necessary evil weed now, and it means that they actually have to do their homework and actually work to actually listen to their populace. And this, look, human beings, and this has been the toughest year and a half of all of our lives, really and truly. I don't think I'm going on a limb there. And I just think it's time to put in the effort to do this and make this happen once and for all. Is the pressure of the midterm elections going to help the cause or hurt the cause, Bruce?
I think it will help the cause because we're 1/3 of the Senate turns over in the midterms, right? But the entire House turns over. And I think the members of the House are actually much more perceptive in terms of realizing that legalization is a very popular issue. We're seeing 65-70% of Americans regardless of party, looking for or supporting legalization. I think it's those Senate races. And what I think people can do is individually reach out to their 2 Senate members. As soon as the Senate bill dropped, I noted that neither of my senators, Maria Cantwell or Patty Murray in Washington State, were co-sponsors. Well, I sent out a social media tweet basically tagging both of them and saying, look, there are more than 20,000 Washingtonians, your constituents, who are in the legal cannabis industry here. Why are you not a co-signer in this bill? Why are you not a co-sponsor? Like, my job's important too.
So what did they say?
I'm still waiting to hear back from them, Jimmy.
That's what drives me nuts. You reach out on social media and they're clueless, right?
But that's a start. It's a start. It's a way to tell them, look, we're watching. Right. We have jobs at stake here. This isn't just like, oh, we want to smoke weed on a Friday night. This is our livelihood. This puts food on our family's table.
It's Bruce, truly a question for you. Levi in the chat is speculating that the Supreme Court will legalize marijuana before Congress does. With what Clarence Thomas had to say, what do you think?
How are they going to do that?
That's actually a fear of mine. I wrote a column about that a couple of weeks ago. And my fear was that with Clarence Thomas's little note, which is essentially like one member of the Supreme Court waking up after 10 years and saying, this doesn't seem right. My fear is that members of the Senate would actually use that as a fallback not to vote for one of these bills. They'd say, oh, you know what? Let the Supreme Court declare it illegal, then we'll come in and clean it up, which is essentially what the Mexican Senate did, Right. I'm not counting on the Supreme Court to do that.
History can repeat itself. That's what happened 51 years ago, right?
With Timothy Leary.
Yeah, Timothy Leary case, right?
Right. SCOTUS came down in May of '69 and said the Marijuana Tax Act is unconstitutional, and that brought in the Controlled Substance Act to remedy that.
Oh, now you're hitting the wonk bone, huh? Now those of us who are like Timothy Leary, that case, right, gave birth to the Controlled Substances Act. Oh,
the Schaefer report.
David is a historian.
Schaefer report up on my screen a little while ago, where he said basically this whole thing is a farce, and not only he basically said deschedule it. And don't pay attention to people who are having casual sales of small amounts. It's not worth the government's time. Right? Well, then he never got his appointment to the federal bench because Nixon was not happy with that report.
Yeah.
I think everyone can agree that the law enforcement community would like to be taken out of the mix here and make it decriminalized. And then that's going to save a lot of money. People aren't bringing up the fact that if you take away that from the legal system, that's going to save an awful lot of money here, and a lot of effort perhaps could go into, keeping an eye on the people that run around. Need to keep an eye on that. And targeting them because of that. And that has to stop. And, we hope it happens. Hey, Bruce, I could talk with you forever. And I so appreciate you taking the half hour out of your Friday afternoon out there in Washington State. Please keep in touch. Tell people how we can find out all about Leafly like they don't know.
Oh, just come on over to Leafly News. Just Google, just go leafly.com or Google Leafly News, and you'll see all of the great stuff we've got up there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the efforts that you do, Bruce, for Leafly and that whole website. I learned quite a bit following that when I first got my medical card back in 2013. So there you go. All right, we're going to take a break. We've got another new panel coming in, and you don't want to miss that. Green Rush Live continues after this. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And when I started Pro Cannabis Media 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure the cannabis industry had a professional outlet to share their stories in their own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, cannabis has saved my life, Cannabis has changed my life. Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, "Cannabis has saved my life. Cannabis has changed my life." Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically get one of our t-shirts with that closing line I use all the time, "It's a whole new world of weed." But as the legendary Billy Mays used to say, that's not all. One of those finalists will win one of these really cool full-story cannabis storage units. It's a great way to store your cannabis in their food-grade aluminum containers. It's award-winning, child-proof, smell-proof, and has a solid contemporary design. It's a $220 value, but you can win one if we pick your story and feature it on our show. Yes, we will pick one of those 5 finalists, and they will receive this $220 value absolutely free. Now, we ask you to keep your story to under 90 seconds on video and less than 500 words in text. So come out of the cannabis closet and tell us your story, and you could win with yourstory.com. Just go on to procannabismedia.com and sign up today. You might even join us on one of our shows.
So I think there's one very important difference between me and most of my team members and other cannabis accounting firms, especially outsourced cannabis accounting firms. With a lot of the other firms, you're going to find bookkeepers or folks that were accountants for their entire career, but they were junior accountants. I've spent most of my career alongside CFOs at public companies, companies with thousands of employees, public companies. So much of my career wasn't spent in the debits and credits. It was spent with the CFO, CEO, COO of large public companies, working on strategy, working on planning and big initiatives, working on projects such as mergers and integrations. So that high level experience, along with being able to do the debits and credits and having members of my team that also have fairly senior experience and also members of the team that are junior and can do the bookkeeping at a little bit lower cost than some of the people with the experience, gives our clients a much broader depth of experience than a lot of the other firms where you're hiring someone that is just a bookkeeper and can't help with the strategy side of it, or someone that's been an executive for a long time and can only help with the strategy but can't help with the hands-on.
Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be. All right, welcome back to the final half hour of Green Rush Live. This is our regular Friday afternoon live talk show about the business of cannabis. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media, and every week I am joined by my pal, David Rabinovitz. David, again, thank you so much for being there.
My pleasure, Jimmy.
And do you want to introduce the panel? I'm going to let you do that because I know that next week I'm going to make this announcement. David Rabinovitz is going to be hosting for me so I can get 48 hours in the wilds of Maine, okay? And visit some old friends up that way. And I believe that you're bringing back, you're going to the bullpen and you're bringing in the left-hander, Curt Dalton, to co-host with you. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. It's going to be a great show. Jimmy, I just hope we don't have to replace it.
No. Wally Pipp, that's who it was. I feel like Wally Pipp. Curt, isn't that the guy that Lou Gehrig, isn't that the guy, right? I'll never come back.
Everybody needs a middle relief guy, a lefty coming out of the bullpen, Jimmy. Watch out.
All right. Well, we want to introduce everybody in the room here. Deon Osborne is with us. He's the managing editor of the Black Wall Street Times, and he wrote a piece this week that caught my eye enough that I tracked him down and convinced him to join the panel here on Friday afternoon. Deon, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm happy and grateful to be here with y'all.
There you go. And you're actually in Oklahoma. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
All right. And Bart Schaneman is with us as well. And he's an assistant editor, maybe I got your raise, for MJBiz Daily. Bart, where are you? You're in Colorado, are you not?
That's right. Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for joining us. And last but certainly not least, one of my favorite people that I've been able to interview over the last year or so. Her name's Jamie Pearson. She's the CEO of Bhang Corporation, and she joins us. Where are you joining us from? Because I know you're all over the world, Jamie.
Today, I'm in Montana.
All right, Montana. Awesome. That's right. Well, thank you, and appreciate you joining us all on Friday afternoon. So I'm just going to go right around the room, and actually, we're going to start with Jamie, okay? Because I really want a perspective from your perspective of what you saw the U.S. senators unveil last Wednesday with this new CAOA. Why they couldn't call it the Much More Act would have been a lot better, but CAOA is what we've got, the Cannabis Administrative Opportunity Act. What were your impressions of it when you first read it? And can you believe you actually saw the day that the U.S. Majority Senate leader introduced such a thing?
Well, I actually did a little bit of work with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and helped answer some questions from the industry perspective about things like interstate commerce and edibles and milligram limits. I was on a panel of women CEOs that Kirsten approached around things like this bill. So we sort of had an insider view ahead of time about what was coming and how the politics were playing out behind the scenes. So I guess it's a little bit of a spoiler alert for me to say, yes, I knew this was coming. And I was, sworn to secrecy, I'll say. When I finally saw the draft that was released, if it passes the way it's intended to, there were some pleasant surprises in there from my perspective. One was I was quite surprised that they just suggested descheduling cannabis altogether rather than bringing it down to a Schedule II drug or something like that. I think that would have been terrible. So I was happy to see that. I'm not surprised that the Dems couldn't get a good set of initials that made some sort of sense, but they're not very good at that. Not a priority. And then I hope to see that it doesn't get watered down too much and that there isn't too much nonsense that goes on. I'm not hopeful that it will be anywhere near what it is now, but that's the things that I'm worried about that they're going to do is, just the shenanigans that's always involved in politics. What I'm hoping is that interstate commerce remains and that they ask for some guidance from medical professionals around milligrams, because there's this constant desire to limit the number of milligrams in edibles and to put onerous packaging rules around edibles. And being an edibles manufacturer, that's near and dear to my heart. I would like to see them do some common sense approaches and ask industry professionals before they get these rules too far down the road. The other part of it that I'm excited about is the potential to have banking and advertising and insurance. So we'll see what happens when it all shakes out.
Yeah. Bart, your impressions of the bill? I'm sure you've looked at every one of those 163 pages.
Well, I think kind of to Jamie's point there too, like I think, yeah, the one danger with this is that it maybe tries to do a little bit too much, but I mean, there are a lot of things here. I think the other thing, the 280E tax code reform, like that is constantly, brought up with all of our reporting, and, just it's such a huge burden for every company in the industry and any plant touching company anyway. And being, somewhat proactive on that and to eliminate it, I think would be great. It's cool that they've got stuff in here that's a social equity component too, and trying to, help out economically disadvantaged people, people hurt by the war on drugs. And, these grant programs is great. I mean, when I do my reporting on the challenges behind the social equity provisions and getting more diversity and people of color in the industry, kind of the number one obstacle is just the lack of funding that these people have access to that are trying to apply for these social equity licenses. So if these grant programs do work in their favor and help them to get some kind of capital up front. I mean, it takes a lot of money to start a marijuana company and wait for regulations to come through, and you're sitting on real estate and all these things. So yeah, the grant program part of it is really cool. Yeah, I mean, it would really change the industry if this thing could go through. I mean, I think it's a long shot. I think that getting everyone to vote for it, I think it's going to be a pretty tough hill to climb. But yeah, I mean, it's the most comprehensive thing that we've seen so far, and that it just in itself, I think, is a good sign.
Right. And it's a negotiating ploy to go in and ask for everything so
Right.
that you can see what you want to live with and what the other side can give back and all that. Deon, your impressions of what you saw, and we should say that you are an editor for the Black Wall Street Times. I don't want to belittle your position, sir.
No, I think you had it right. But
Okay.
just to piggyback what Jamie and Bart said, I pretty much agree on those points. I think the fact that it's even being brought to this level is going to have, an effect on what states end up doing, now that they see it's more socially acceptable. But I do have concerns if we can't even get an infrastructure bill passed, how we would get cannabis passed. I do see, some issues there. But I think the fact that it intentionally addresses the war on drugs and how, Black and brown people are disproportionately arrested for, God's gift to earth. It really makes an impact there, because a lot of the ways in which it was criminalized in the first place has to do with racialization and things like that. And so I think it does try and change people's perspectives about it, for sure. And so I'm hopeful that if it doesn't even get passed, at the very least, it will cause some shifts on the state level.
And, I think the first thing you got to do to right or wrong is recognize it was wrong. And I think they have done that. And to be honest, I always thought God's gift to earth was Curt Dalton. So, Curt, what's your impressions? What's your impressions of the bill? Because I haven't heard those yet.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to steal from everybody. They just took a little bit of my thunder, but I wrote the article actually the next day that came out. First reaction was the 25% graduated marijuana federal tax. That's going to keep the black market alive and kicking forever. You had Senator Booker saying he would stop the Safe Banking Act. In lieu of this, he will not pass it. And he's actually stepped back from that now. We wrote a piece on that. And the interstate commerce is exactly right. Huge right there. With that, if that can stay in, it would be great. And then, like as Jamie said, with some inside information, like Schumer has been doing this for 50 years, literally, or 30. He's not an idiot. He knows he doesn't have the votes. He's well short, like over 10, and you need a lot of those Republicans. So there's got to be something, I hope, behind the scenes. And he's thrown it out there like he did on The View the other day. Like, we're just throwing it out there saying, what don't you like? Talk to us. And he will either change it or work with you. So let's hope that, politicians know what they're doing here at this stage, and they know that here's the opening offer. Now let's work it and let's get this done. But like, cross our fingers, like Jamie said, let's hope.
And David is a guy. Go ahead, Jamie. Go ahead.
To Deon's point, where he's worried about them not being able to pass an infrastructure bill. An infrastructure bill isn't sexy. It doesn't get votes. The general population doesn't understand it, isn't probably watching it too much, but constituents are watching the cannabis voting situation. It's a hot topic, and it's going to generate revenue. And what all of these states understand is that this is a revenue stream that's brand new. It's coming from the illicit market, the legacy market, and they're actually, instead of having a monopoly money situation where they're going to take money out of this legal bucket and put it in this legal bucket instead, because the Republicans like this bucket versus that bucket, and that game they keep playing, they get a brand new bucket to go pull money from. And that's sexy. And they're all very interested in it across the aisle. So what Senator Gillibrand talked to us about was that they did have a strategy, for a very specific strategy about approaching the Republicans and going to them and saying, it's important to both of our parties that we get something passed so we can go get money from this new bucket. Tell us what you want. But this was basically, like you said, the initial pass, take their temperature and see what's going to happen politically. And then the other point that I want to make is that our group of female CEOs, the one thing that every single one of us asked for was 280E reform. And the one thing we demanded was a provision in the bill that had money available for Black and brown people and for women trying to get into the business, because there's new statistics. I think it was MJ Marijuana Business Journal that published that, the women CEO situation is dropping drastically year by year. So we have a group of people sitting in prison that need to be addressed and that need to be brought into this market, with open arms and with an acknowledgement that they've paid the price for all of us to be here. But then also that, we're in prohibition. We can make the industry look any way we want. And what we want is parity.
Right. Absolutely.
Amy really hit it on the head. And Deon, keep something else in mind. The marijuana bill is just a marijuana bill. It's 163 pages. The infrastructure bill is volumes and volumes. I don't know that anybody other than people in DC or folks really in the infrastructure industry have actually read it. And the few articles I have read about it talk about there's all kinds of stuff thrown in there, which is what legislators do, that have nothing to do directly with infrastructure, right? This is just marijuana. It covers all the facets of it, kind of like the slices of an orange. You got the restorative justice funding through the SBA, social justice, small business protections, whole bunch of other things, but it's just marijuana. And I think that's it would be nice if when they put bills together, they actually stuck with the subject matter of the bill versus what goes on in DC.
And speaking of what goes on in DC, I'm guessing you guys brought up the infrastructure bill. This is the political game, right? Hey, if you give me a little over here, I'll give you a little over there. And, how can we find, are they going to talk to each other? That's the most important thing. Bart, I got to ask you directly, can cannabis be what everyone in this room knows it can be? Bringing people together, It's like, hey, Curt, we should go down to DC and pass a joint inside the chamber just to get everybody to chill out and talk to each other. Bart, is that ever going to happen?
Well, people have tried that. People have taken joints down to Capitol Hill and rolled them on the steps. And
it didn't work, did it?
It wasn't the kumbaya moment they hoped, I think. But
was it two guys that do Vote Pro podcast?
Right. That's right. And that Vote Pro podcast is certainly what it's all about now, too. Deon, go ahead, Bart. I'm sorry.
I mean, what Jamie was saying, too, about this revenue stream, I mean, that is the key thing there. That's the most attractive thing about all of this, is that we're coming out of a pandemic. We're looking for ways to, a lot of these states that have had, industries leave, Rust Belt states, places that are suffering economically. I mean, this is one of the easiest ways to add some kind of revenue to your coffers, tax money, and use it to build schools. I mean, you talk about infrastructure. I mean, take marijuana tax money and use it to build roads. I mean, so yeah, I do think that it can bring people together over that key point, that if you want jobs, if you want money coming into your state, legalize marijuana.
Right. And then in Massachusetts, there's a bridge that needs repair in I-93. This poor truck blew up a bridge. Deon, part of this, and Cory Booker was adamant about this. I love his passion, by the way. Talking about this being a social justice bill. He wants everybody who can see the injustices that have gone on about cannabis would like to see the opportunity to expunge a lot of records of people that have been incarcerated for nonviolent cannabis possession crimes. Doesn't it make sense? We're also suffering from an economy right now where you can't fill the jobs out there. Doesn't it make sense to give the hopefully ex-prison population an opportunity to get some workforce development and get into this industry?
I mean, absolutely. You look at Oklahoma, and I would encourage, all the senators to look at Oklahoma. Even though we've only passed medical marijuana, the law is so liberal that as far on the patient side, you don't have to have any qualifying condition. You simply go to your doctor and say you need it and give them whatever reason you want, and you just pay them a fee and they give you it. On the business side, $2,500. And, they're adding a lot more regulations now, but it's still very much more loose than, say, Arkansas, which I believe when they were first considering it was only going to award 3 or 4 in the whole state dispensaries. And so you have to look at places like Oklahoma where, you look at the politics of it, it's very conservative and you wouldn't consider that. But it has worked so well for us that, we're not really struggling that much economically. We've actually been able to have a cushion and put hundreds of thousands into a rainy day fund. Just the 6 months of 2021, the OMMA was reporting that we've earned almost $150,000 from tax money, local, state, and then in excise tax for marijuana. And so it works, and that's just medical. That's just with 10% of Oklahomans having a medical card. And so I think that it just makes perfect sense, like Bart was saying. And yes, I mean, Oklahoma is the 3rd highest prison population. We have a 3rd highest prison population and the highest for women in the world, and so just, imagine that, and a lot of it is for simple possession, and so for these companies that maybe don't pay the highest wage starting out, whining about not having anyone to fill those spots. Like you're saying, we have plenty of people who are willing to get out there and get started, and so it just makes perfect sense socially and economically. But at the end of the day, yeah, it is the right thing to do. One thing I think that is important to consider and to watch is how, if it is passed, how it would translate into making sure it's equitable. Because we do have issues even with Black dispensary owners here in the state. I will point you to a man named LaRue Bratcher, who is facing a murder charge because he shot a burglar outside trying to get into his grow operation, and his cannabis license had lapsed at the time of the shooting. And so there are some equity issues that we need to keep in mind, but I think it just makes perfect sense.
Hey, Curt, as someone who can recognize an opportunity, if it makes perfect sense to everybody on this call, why the hell can't it get done? Curt, I'm going to let you take it.
I think, Deon, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't Oklahoma have the most dispensaries now of any state in America, or is it by population?
I try not to say the most, but I do believe by per capita, yes.
Yeah, like that's one of those trivia questions everybody will get wrong, unless you're really, everybody in this group might get, but 99% of the world would be like, no way.
Hey, Curt, what do you like? You think the idea of cannabis trivia live streamed would be a good one?
Maybe on the night.
Jamie said yes. I like that. Good. We're going to do that.
Like dropping the ball, midnight show. Yep.
No, well, I don't know about midnight. I think me, I'm old, so it's probably good. And East Coast time, evening time at sunset is really, I have an opportunity to do it downstairs at the Great Walk here in the Greater Boston area, and I think we're gonna do that. We're gonna have some fun, and I think you'd be a great co-host. I'm just saying, okay? And I can pretty much promise you libation and food. How's that?
Fair enough.
All right. Jamie, I do want to get back to something that you did bring up. It's a serious question, and it has to do with women and at the C level in the cannabis industry. You're 100% right. I saw that same item that in, I think it was 2017, 37% of cannabis companies had female CEOs at that level, and now it's down to 8. And how does that happen in 4 years? Can you explain that to me? Or maybe I'm being naive.
I can explain it. I will tell you that this is the general procedure of how things work. It's not always this way, but this is generally what works, is that when a company's in trouble and or is a startup, or the work is difficult, or there's not a good chance of survival, those are typically the opportunities where a board will take whoever will take the job, and they'll offer a job to a person of color or a woman and go, well, hey, do you want to be in the C-suite? And they'll hand you something, and it's really difficult, and they turn it around, and then the job is typically taken away and given to someone who has the experience to scale it. And so what you'll see is in the very beginning, when there were a lot of women and a lot of people of color in C-suite positions, a lot of these companies were in trouble. Many of them got acquired. There was consolidation, and then you take the more qualified applicant. And so what we've seen is through consolidation, through the demise of companies that were already on the ropes and where positions were given to less qualified people, that's typically how that works. And the statistics show that companies run in a C-suite by predominantly people of color and predominantly women don't have the greatest survival rates. But when you dig deeper into that statistic and you ask yourself why, you find that it's typically because those companies were already in trouble when those opportunities were given. That's generally why that is the case.
Deb Borchardt at the Green Market Report helped me on a story with Stormy Simon, when she took over High Times. And I didn't know what the glass cliff was until Deb explained exactly what you just said.
Sure.
Part of our story was Stormy was given that job, and let's just say was unsuccessful.
Stormy's a girlfriend of mine, and I know exactly what happened to Stormy, and it's a very, very typical situation. I got lucky. I got put in a situation where the company was not doing well, and I've turned it around, and we're still here. And so far, knock on wood, they're not trying to get rid of me, but who knows?
That's not wood up there. You actually have a very good brain, Jamie. Don't discount that, please. That's not, I think there are more opportunities should be given to women and people, and those have been most impacted by the war on drugs. That's what this plant was put on this earth to do, was to give it equal right to grow it, to share it, to respect it. And God, you don't have to look any further than the Rastafarians in Jamaica. They get it. Okay. It is a religious experience for them. And I just don't understand getting it through the heads of our leaders. Now, the people want this. Okay. Now take that bill, give me 2 or 3 wins, and I think the industry can be happy. I think, if we get rid of the 2.8, if you deschedule it, the whole industry is going to be happy. If that's the only thing that happens, and it's still up to the states individually, and there's no interstate commerce, okay? Can you live with that, Jamie?
I'm living with it now. It wouldn't be my preference, but I'm living with it now. Gotcha. But I've seen a white paper circulating around about the very basis in the law that allowed states to have legal medical cannabis initially when they were fighting against the federal government, is the basis of the law for allowing interstate commerce, and that may actually be challenged outside of this bill. So we've got some hope. The one thing I would like to say though is that cannabis in itself as a plant, I think, is going as the usage becomes more ubiquitous, and we're starting to see beverages take hold, and we're starting to see people replacing alcohol. We're starting to see more and more people using cannabis. The one thing I believe will happen, and this is just my opinion, is that as people start using cannabis, they're going to have a deeper experience in their own minds And I do think that empathy will grow in our culture, in our communities, in our people, and we will start to see the plant actually start changing minds. So I think that while we're fighting for it to become legal, more and more people are using it, and we're starting to see this collective intelligence and empathy grow. And I think the plant will transform our country and our world for the better.
It's almost like a perfect storm right now, because we're coming off the worst year and a half of most of our lives for the most part, and things are aligning. I want to get final thoughts from everybody here as we wrap this thing up. Deon, having Jamie on this panel makes me feel much better about the whole thing. How do you feel?
Same. I mean, I don't have any type of communications with any senators, so I'm going to take your word on that, and so that does give me hope. And so, we'll be watching closely. And I think it also is a responsibility on us as media to be more active and more intentional in letting people know what's going on about this.
Well, all I could keep telling people is like, share, and subscribe to Pro Cannabis Media and MJBiz, of course. Bart, your final thoughts. By the way, a quick compliment. You weren't here to hear this, but David Rabinovitz did say that the MJBiz daily recap of the bill was the best one on the internet. So congrats on that.
Yeah, well, that goes to my colleague, Jeff Smith. He's the one that did that, but yeah, thanks. I think we have a good team here, and we're trying to do our best to cover everything. But no, I see all of this as just another turn of the screw, another step forward in progress. And I think we've been patient to this point, and to continue to be patient, and just kind of, hope that, as Jamie said, this slow kind of gradual acceptance of marijuana is going to continue to work in the industry's favor, and it's all going to play out the way it's supposed to. Might not be this year, but it's definitely going to happen at some point.
Curt, final thoughts on that?
Just a couple of things that everybody said. Schumer's quoted the 75% Americans want legalization. If you deschedule it, you're definitely going to have interstate commerce. It's just not going to be above the board. It's going to be below the board, because now the penalty for getting caught is going to be very minimal. And let's just hope Schumer's got a plan. I mean, I don't think he wants to look foolish. He's done this a long time. He must know some things, hopefully that they can get this through, even though it looks a little bleak. But we all want to see some version of it get through. So
there you go. Jamie, is your product in Massachusetts dispensaries yet?
Almost. We're with True Leave, and they're producing it. So very, very soon.
Well, I know the new business development guy. He's a great guy. And perhaps I can, put a little plug in for you, because you've been terrific with us, and I thank you very much for that.
Are you talking about Camillo?
Jason, I think his name is.
Jason, yes.
Yeah.
Jason's head of wholesale sales, and we're in almost daily contact. Yeah, he's great.
There you go. Well, now you can tell him that you know me. Anyway, I don't know if he'll hang up on you or not. David, I wish you the best of luck next week with Curt. Thank you for filling in for me.
You got it.
All right, that'll do it for another edition of Green Rush Live. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And don't go away, because Weed Talk News is coming up next. Coming up on Weed Talk News this week, it's reaction time to the Senate initiative for the legalization of cannabis. And it's not too promising in a partisan political climate in D.C. Plus, you'll be able to add weed to your essential carry-on items at New York airports. The state of Illinois is getting sued by a Michigan dispensary over preferential treatment of social equity applicants. Plus, the passing of a California hash legend, Frenchie Cannoli, and a tribute from Emerald Media's Christina DiGiovanni on Weed Talk News next. PCM TV is supported by Salient Systems, a world leader in video management security, and by Revolutionary Clinics, a medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of We Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. So, have you shared your cannabis story yet? Please go to our website, procannabismedia.com. Tell us your cannabis story. You could win a great prize from yourstory.com. First up this week, it's the reaction to last week's federal legalization bill, the Cannabis Administrative and Opportunity Act. Now, checking with cannabis media sources and business leaders from all over the country this week that I talked to, everyone was overwhelmingly positive, but there is a lot of doubt that our elected officials will get anything done before the midterm elections. Now, that includes Frank Nuttall, the CEO of Unrivaled Brands, a major multi-state operator who we talked to on In the Weeds.
So over the long term, I fully expect and believe and support legalization. With that said, I don't know that the Senate's got the votes right now to do that. And I think at some point, to your comment, we may be looking at a lesser but still good first step forward. And I think one of the big issues in our industry is frankly commercial banking. And the fact that we don't have good access to commercial banking and cash handling and credit card processing at this point in the industry's growth is both unfortunate and frankly, one of the biggest operating pain points we experience. So I would like to ultimately see legalization, of course. I just don't know that's going to happen right now, given the political divide, as you referenced, the construct. Certainly, note that having, a bank act would be a huge step forward.
If you're in the cannabis industry, send your comments about the bill to cannabis_reform@finance.senate.gov, and that's before September 1st. Now, with more on what's going on in Washington, D.C., our guy from Vote Pro Podcast is Phil Adams with our D.C. report. Phil?
Hi, I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, and this is the Weed Talk News D.C. report. 2 GOP congressmen are urging President Biden to make good on his campaign promise to reschedule cannabis under the Controlled Substances Act. In a letter to the president, Representatives Dave Joyce of Ohio and Don Young of Arkansas called the measure a matter of public health. Joyce tweeted the letter with a message citing the nearly 70,000 deaths from opioids last year, saying, quote, "The U.S. can no longer afford to sideline less addictive pain management alternatives." Both lawmakers are co-chairs of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus. Tennessee Democrat Steve Cohen roundly criticized the suspension of U.S. sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson from Olympic competition. Richardson was suspended for 1 month after testing positive for THC in violation of United States anti-doping agency policy. Speaking at a House Judiciary Committee session, Cohen called it hypocritical that athletes are suspended for using cannabis while alcohol use is generally tolerated. Cohen said, quote, "Marijuana is not a performance-enhancing drug unless you're entered in the Coney Island hot dog eating contest." The White House has declined to condemn the U.S. Olympic panel for suspending Richardson. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker sought to clarify his position against a vote on the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act. Last week, Booker said he would do everything he can to block the safe banking bill, insisting he would not go along with creating a multi-billion-dollar cannabis industry without reinvesting the tax dollars in the communities hardest hit by the war on drugs. This week, Booker explained that he's not against the bill itself, saying, quote, "Don't get me wrong, I support the Safe Banking Act. I think it's a phenomenal bill." Booker said he simply wants to table a vote on the more modest measure in favor of the Comprehensive Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act that he, along with colleagues Chuck Schumer and Ron Wyden, introduced into the Senate last week. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
Next up, you might remember a few weeks ago a basketball player for the LA Lakers, Alex Caruso, was arrested for cannabis possession when he tried to carry his personal stash onto a plane at the Central Station Airport at Texas A&M. Wrong location, Alex. You should have gone through LAX or now New York. That's right. Law enforcement in the Empire State is going to give you a pass as long as you have less than the state limit of 3 ounces, said Sheriff Craig Apple. No kidding, that's the guy's name, Craig Apple. Anyway, quote, "We don't take it away from you anymore. It's legal as long as it's not over 3 ounces, so have a nice day. Just don't pack over 3 ounces into your backpack, and you want to be really sure, put it in your check bag." Now it's time for the Green Market Report with Deborah Borchardt. Deborah?
This is the business update for Weed Talk News from the Green Market Report. July 10th, or Dab Day, is turning into a dud day. It's also called Oil Day, and the idea is that July 10th, or 710, upside down spells oil. This year, total U.S. cannabis sales actually decreased by 10% over an average of the previous 4 Saturdays, according to Headset. Concentrate sales did increase by 24%, and it was the only category that enjoyed positive growth. Air Wellness is buying Nevada-based Tahoe Hydroponics Company in a deal valued at $17 million. Tahoe Hydro operates roughly 33,000 square feet of total cultivation and manufacturing space in its facilities in Nevada. Entourage Health, formerly known as WeedMD, announced preliminary unaudited revenues of $13.6 million for the quarter ending in June. The company said this was another sequential quarter of record sales growth across its adult use and medical sales channels. And that is the big news for this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt from the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
A Michigan-based dispensary, Sozo, is suing Illinois over that new law that their Governor J.B. Pritzker signed into law last week. That bill offers better opportunities for social equity applicants to get their licenses. And for the most part, it's been pretty well received by the cannabis community in that state. Now, obviously, you just can't make everybody happy in the cannabis industry. Air Wellness certainly wasn't worried about the state of Illinois. This week, they bought 2 herbal remedy stores for $30 million. Air is a pretty large multi-state operator with operations in Arizona, Florida, Nevada, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and here in Massachusetts. For the rest of that story in Illinois, here's Canacaster Margot Vaselli. Margot?
I'm Margot Vaselli from Margowana with this week's Weed Talk News Report from Illinois. We finally got the governor, J.B. Pritzker, to sign off on those additional social equity licenses. Finally. All the winners that were awarded these licenses are now scrambling to find their locations in hopes that they can break ground as soon as possible, especially after they're finding out that they're hitting a wall because of the raised prices in construction and also the need for the computer chips that they're going to be needing for their facilities is hard to find and get post-COVID shutdowns. In other news, we seem to have hit a plateau in adult use sales in Illinois, with a steady $115 million per month sales since April. That was post the use it or lose it licenses that allowed for about a dozen additional licensed dispensaries to have opened up in Illinois. That's the Illinois Report. I'm Margot Vaselli for Weed Talk News.
Do you know what the acronym NIMBY stands for? Well, that's not in my backyard. Basically, it's a description of local communities who just don't want cannabis stores in their town or cities. Well, they might want to reconsider that plan since a new study from Clever Real Estate says home values in legal states have increased. For every $1 million in taxes generated by legal sales of cannabis, home values increased by $470. So last year in Illinois, the state collected $205 million in tax revenue. So the math works out that in legal states, average property values increased by $17,000 over the past 4 years. Now, let's head up to Vermont with our green nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan. Jessie Lynn?
Thanks, Jimmy. I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. Vermont's cannabis community is invited to meet Cannabis Control Board Commissioner Kyle Harris and Board Advisory Committee members on Friday, July 23rd at 4 p.m. at Vermont Hemp Company's Learning Barn in Bristol for an informative discussion and question and answer. This free live event is geared towards creating the legal cannabis business space in Vermont and is being put together by the Vermont Cannabis Organization, attorney Dave Silberman, and the Emerald Rose Grow Shop. The Cannabis Control Board met again this week, hosting several speakers. Stephanie Smith, Cannabis Quality Control Policy Administrator, and Carrie Giguere, Director, Public Health, Agricultural Resource Management for the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, explained the hemp program's rules and policies and how that can relate to the adult use cannabis market. Dr. Carly Farmer of BIA Diagnostics spoke about laboratory testing and capacity, and Dan Chang of Korea Botanicals talked about cannabis processing and extraction. This week, the Marijuana for Symptom Relief Oversight Committee also met to start conversations about much needed updates to both the committee's mission and members on the board. They are expected to have these recommendations to the Cannabis Control Board by November 1st, 2021. In the meeting, one dispensary representative advocated for equal representation amongst medical patients, medical providers, cultivators, and caregivers. Another patient representative advocated the opposite, asking not to add any new members to the already deemed outdated and in need of change Symptom Relief Oversight Committee. The board currently only allows patients appointed by the dispensary themselves and does not include caregivers or cultivators at all. Cannabis advocates are hopeful for much needed representation and change on the board in the near future. That's the Vermont report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
Here in Massachusetts, two big companies are in the news. One is Lantern and the other is Curaleaf. Ron Marshalsea has our weekly check-in with the Bay State. Ron?
I'm Ron Marshalsea with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. The demand for recreational cannabis in the state of Massachusetts has exploded. And according to the president of e-commerce marketplace Lantern, serving this key consumer demographic is imperative to their operations as an essential industry. Lantern is an e-commerce marketplace and home delivery platform that is partnering with two companies, Freshly Baked and We Can Deliver, to deliver recreational cannabis in Massachusetts. Both Freshly Baked and We Can Deliver are in the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission's Social Equity Program, and their plan with Lantern is to get cannabis products to the doorstep of consumers in the greater Boston area. Lantern was incubated out of its sister company, Drizzly, a delivery service for alcohol. And Lantern's president, Meredith Mahoney, was quoted as saying, "Companies like Freshly Baked and We Can Deliver exemplify Massachusetts' inventive and tenacious spirit, and we are delighted to work with them. Lantern and Drizzly are both headquartered in Boston, and we will leverage our existing e-commerce insights to provide an exemplary delivery and retail experience." Curaleaf, a multi-state cannabis company, was found to have violated federal law at its Hanover medical dispensary. National Relations Board Judge Ira Sandrin ruled that Curaleaf engaged in unfair labor practices by implicitly promising certain retail store workers increased benefits and better employment conditions if they didn't support unionization. The problem began when the United Food and Commercial Workers Local Union 328 began efforts to unionize workers at the Hanover location in April of 2020. According to the NLRB judge's decision, the problematic communications occurred between management and two employees in May and June of 2020. These were closed-door conversations that were a significant deviation from the company's customary practice to have short-staffed meetings in the open. Sandrin's order calls for Curaleaf to cease and desist from unfair labor practices and take certain affirmative actions to follow lawful labor practices. That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Ron Marshalsea.
So where are all the women in the cannabis industry? In 2017, MJBiz reported that women held 37% of the executive level roles in the industry. But upon further review that year, that percentage had shrunk to 27%. And now, in 2021, Benzinga is reporting that only 8% of CEOs in cannabis are women. So what happened? Well, we'll ask one of those CEOs, Jamie Pearson from Bhang Edibles, on the Green Rush Live on Friday. We talk with cannabis media people from coast to coast, and we start live at 4 on Eastern Time with the CEO of MJBiz, Chris Walsh, and get his insight of what is going on in an ever-changing industry and what might happen in the future now that that U.S. Senate bill has been introduced for discussion. Now, if you've been watching Weed Talk News or the Emerald Media Group's monthly educational webinars on our channel, you are very familiar with Misu Sargenti from Blazin Bakery in New Jersey and Jill Cohen, the Cannabis lady. They actually got together in New Jersey this week at Jill's CBD shop in Maplewood.
Hi, I'm Misu from Blazin Bakery, usually here for Weed Talk News, but today I'm here for Blazin Bakery with the Cannabis lady, Jill Cohen.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, we're at her store in Maplewood, New Jersey, and I am throwing a dog event. We made a dog photo booth, and we had lots of little silly props here. Our dogs are stoned to the bone on Blazin Bakery CBD. So Jill carries my product in her shop, which has been going great. I have Hip and Joint, I have calming products, and I just introduced a new tincture, which is U.S. grown CBD, sourced from Colorado, all natural, and unfiltered coconut oil. And I'll tell you a bit more about why that's so important. But Jill, why don't you tell us about the shop?
Yeah, so my CBD shop, it opened in February, 9 Highland Place, Maplewood Village. I offer a variety of women-owned brands, and every purchase donates to women minority charities. And I have something for everybody, so please come down and see me.
Yes, guys, support women-owned businesses, support small business. Now, let me just tell you why dog-specific U.S.-grown hemp is so important. It's because hemp is really good at leaching toxins from the soil. It's used for soil remediation. Now, what they do is sometimes overseas you'll have like nuclear disaster and they will plant hemp to cleanse the soil. Now, it used to be they would just take that and make hemp rope. What they'll do now is they will make CBD and sell it to the US at a quarter of the price, which is not great. So when you're getting that good deal on gas station gummy bears, that's why. So important to get the right CBD products, but more so for dogs, because if a human ingests it, not great, but not the end of the world. If a dog ingests it, they can have kidney failure from toxic CBD. So really important, make sure your products have a QR code, make sure they are all natural, US sourced, and I would love if you checked out Blazin Bakery's products, because I believe they're the best on the market.
They are the best. They're flying off the shelf in my store. Everyone loves them, and their dogs are getting great relief.
Yes, I truly believe that. And support New Jersey businesses. We're working hard in this state to make a great cannabis industry. And next week we'll be back with more Weed Talk news about the industry, but this week we're having fun with some puppies.
Finally tonight, the cannabis world of California is mourning the loss of a legend named Frenchie Cannoli. When it comes to that state, and specifically the Emerald Triangle, we check in with the founder of Emerald Media Group, Christina Di Giovanni, who knew Frenchie and filed this tribute to him.
Hi, I'm Christina from Emerald Media Group, and I want to give recognition today to Frenchie Cannoli, cannabis industry legend and hash-making master. Frenchie Cannoli got his start by traveling the world. He was born in southern France. He went out to Nepal. He met his wife there. They traveled together. He learned the lost art of hashishin. He's an Emerald Triangle legend, a cannabis legend. He's set the standards for hash making and what we can expect. He was an incredible human being, and his death was very sudden and unexpected. It was a result of a complication from surgery. He was 64 years old when he passed, and the entire industry is mourning his loss. And I just want to put it out there for everyone that knew Frenchie or maybe didn't even have a chance to meet him yet, and to his friends and his family and his loved ones, that this was a true master and legend in the cannabis industry. I had the privilege of meeting him a few times, and I am so grateful that I had that experience to speak with him and to experience his kind-heartedness and his wisdom. And no one can say a bad thing about him. He was just a legend to us, and he will be sorely missed So to Frenchie Cannoli's family, our hearts are with you. To the Emerald Triangle, we're all feeling this loss together. And to everyone out there watching, please, stay safe and healthy as best as you can during these times. So from Emerald Media Group and for Weed Talk News, I'm Christina DiGiovanni.
That will do it for this week's Weed Talk News. Get your cannabis stories in on ProCannabisMedia.com and tune in on Friday to Green Rush Live. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual. Not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the cost low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.